Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is a bit of a rabbit hole, let me tell you that. This case really, when I researched it, properly sent me down a rabbit hole. Like, you click on a link, that link sends you to somewhere else with some other theory, that sends you to somewhere else with some other theory, and my gosh, did it take me a long time to do this case. But it is on 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, whose boy's death has created so much controversy over the years, like an insane amount. There's been so much fighting over sides. You'll see as you go through the case, but it's kind of, people believe that it was accidental, or people believe that it was murder, and that is it. And there's been so much fighting online, there's been so much like bickering and contradicting, and you either believe that it was accidental or you believe that he was murdered. It's been 8 years since his death, and after his family has fought so hard for it because they never believed that it was accidental, they believe that their son was murdered. His case is now being re-looked into, probably as a final kind of verdict, I guess. Let me just take you through this case from the beginning. If you've not heard of it, then you're in for a doozy. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this one, because personally, I'm going to keep this video impartial, and I'm probably going to leave my opinion to the end because I don't want to sway any of you. I want to hear what you think, like, through it all. But there's some compelling arguments for either side. And as I said, it really sent me down a rabbit hole researching this one. This was suggested by Kay, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions that you guys have. And if you have any more, of course, let me know. I'd just like to let you know that I mean no disrespect to anyone I talk about today. I've just got this information from the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Kendrick Lamar Johnson was born on the 10th of October in 1995 to parents Kenneth and Jacqueline in Valdosta, Georgia in the US. Kendrick was the youngest of 4 children, and he went to school in Lowndes High School in Valdosta. He was described as this really sweet but very quiet boy. He loved sports, he was a jokester, and he always filled the house with laughter. His family said that he was the light of their household. He was described as an average student, but he had a real knack for numbers, so he would have been quite good at maths. He was really well mannered, he was really liked by his peers, he had quite a lot of friends, he was quite popular, and he was also a very responsible teenager. He had actually taken a few years off sport at the time, but he was looking to rejoin the football team when he died. He was a 3-sport athlete, and he dreamed of one day playing professional football. Unfortunately, that would never happen because on the 11th of January in 2013, Kendrick was found dead in his school, in the gymnasium, inside of a wrestling mat, and he was just 17 years old. So that night, he'd gone to school like normal, and he was supposed to be staying at school to either watch a game or participate in a game. I'm not sure which, but he was staying late, and his parents expected him to not come straight home after school. What they did expect though was that after this sporting event had happened, was that he would then return straight home. That was what he said he would do, and that was the understanding of his parents. Now, Kendrick would always get home by at least 11:30 at the very latest. It was now getting up to 10 p.m. The sports event should have finished a long time ago, and Kendrick was not home yet. His mother actually started to get worried. I'm going to refer to her as Jackie because that is how she is widely known. So Jackie decided that she was going to get in the car and she was going to drive to school to see if she could find her son. She drove around for a while, and when it got to midnight and she'd seen nothing, and again, his curfew, I don't think he had a curfew, but he was always on by 11:30. That had, passed by half an hour. She still hadn't heard anything. She'd not seen him. And she decides to ring the police. She reports him as a missing person. The next morning at 8 a.m, a police officer goes round to the school. He goes to check whether Kendrick has signed into classes that day, whether he's just turned up. Maybe he was staying at a friend's or something and he didn't want to tell his parents. And now it's the next school day and he's in school. But he wasn't there. Also, his mother went to the school too. She was telling them all about what happened, and they were actually, by all accounts, helping her make these missing persons posters for him. When she realizes that the officer's there, she asked to speak to the officer, regarding her missing son. The officer actually did stay at the school, like, most of the morning. I don't know why. I don't know whether he's just interviewing people or what, but he stayed there for a couple of hours. And then at 10:32 a.m, he gets a call where he is directed towards a gym for a code blue. Now, a group of students were in the gym. They were filling out these surveys, and they kind of had bleachers in the gym. So they're all sat on these bleachers, and to the left of the bleachers, they have the wrestling mats. These mats are used for wrestling, of course, and gymnastics, things like that. They're just used for that kind of sport. And so what they normally do is they get wrapped up and they get stood vertically, and they have this band around them, and they're all just kind of stacked up like that. And then when you want one, you pull it out and you use it, and then you put it back. The thing was, though, is that students would often sit on top of them because they're quite sturdy and quite heavy. And so they were sat on the bleachers doing these surveys. They were sat on top of the mats doing these surveys, when one student, a female student, I believe, noticed white socks sticking out from, one of these mats. At first, they thought it was a joke. Why wouldn't you think that that was a joke? So they got closer, and it wasn't a joke. The teacher of the class, Philip Pipelow, said that 2 girls came rushing over. They obviously told him that he needed to get over to the mats because they could see something inside him. He went over and he grabbed this person's ankle, expecting to see a response, but there was none. So that was when he quickly tried to remove all of the mats in front so that he could get this mat down, because somebody was in danger. Somebody was wrapped up in that mat, and that was dangerous. So he figured that this person could still be alive and he needed to help them. So he pulls down the mat and he lays it flat. At the time, they didn't realize that it was a potential crime scene. They just wanted to help the person that was in there. Unfortunately, it was already too late. As they pulled it down, he noticed the smell of vomit and decay and blood, and he knew straight away that this person was deceased. And that is when the whole class realized that it was a dead body in there. It was Kendrick's dead body. Panicked, a student rang 911. The school was closed off and locked down, and the police came immediately. Again, that police officer was already there. They were called to attend the Code Blue, so he got there very quickly. And Jackie was still at the school at this time, so she's there looking for her son. Well, not looking for her son at school, but to see if she can find out any information. They're helping her do these missing persons posters, and then I believe she found out by other students that her son was dead in the gym, wrapped up in a mat, which is utterly devastating. You would just never imagine hearing news like that from his own school. Oh, I can't even imagine how much pain and how much devastation she must have felt at that time. She was doing missing persons posters, hoping for the best, hoping that he was just out there somewhere, and he was dead in his school gym. When the officer attended the Code Blue, he came in, he saw the students all talking about a dead body, and the teacher kind of kneeled over the mat. Kendrick was found head first, with one arm kind of forward like this, I believe, and he was found in the middle of the mat, which had been rolled up and against the back wall. So while this arm was kind of like this, his other arm was back behind him. The other mats around him, there were 21, I believe, in total. They were all stored vertically, as I've said. They were used for the various things that they needed in the gym. They all stood about 3 deep from the wall, generally, sometimes more. Now, a lot of the boys didn't actually have lockers. A lot of them were, they couldn't really afford them, and so it was rumoured that they would use these mats as their lockers so that they didn't have to pay for one, and they would often store their belongings in them. They were also tied up in the middle to keep them from unravelling, because obviously if you've got a stack of mats all unravelling into each other, making a mess would just be a nightmare, so they tied them too. These mats were almost 6 foot high and 3 foot wide. And when they found his body, let's just say that there are lots of photos of that. You can literally look up his body. You can see his socks in the mat. And it's kind of insane. Like, some of the pictures that are there are so many photos of him. There are some of his body. Everything's out there. Like, his face, his body, how he was found, when the mat was unraveled. It's all out there. It's all out there for everyone to see. So if you're interested in that, you can look it up. You probably only have to type his name in and it will come up. It is pretty grim and it's not a good sight to look at. So only if you really want to, if you're kind of squeamish or things like that, I won't advise you to look at it because they're pretty horrific photos. But we will get more into that as we go through the case. So more emergency services arrive, the fire department arrive, and 3 firefighters tend to his body. Behind them are paramedics who said that rigor mortis had already set in. The police began their investigation and they began looking at surveillance footage. There was a lot of it around the school. Now, some of this surveillance shows Kendrick going into the gym at 1:09 p.m. on the 10th of January. Now, the time on the system wasn't exactly accurate, so that is the kind of estimated time that he went in there. But he was never caught leaving after that, and he was marked absent in his next class. In that same room, they found 2 pairs of shoes and some school books. 1 pair of white and orange kind of Nike trainers that he was wearing that day that he is clearly seen going into the gym with them on his feet. And they were inside the mat. So if you imagine if you've looked at the pictures, you'll see what I mean, because you can see them. But if you imagine the mat vertical and he is face down in it, his feet are sticking out at the end. Now the shoes, say that is his legs, the shoes were kind of next to his legs. So his feet were up here and the shoes had fallen down next to his legs. It kind of did, in a way, look like somebody had placed them in there. But it also could have been that he had kicked them off during struggling to get out of, obviously, being in the mat. The other pair of shoes was this black and white Adidas set, and one was found under where his head would have been if he was inside the mat. It was found in the mat where his head would have been, sort of under his head. The other was found just by the mats, kind of outside of it. And it came out that he actually did share these shoes with another classmate, with his friend, because again, they didn't have very much money, so they used to share these trainers. They used to store them in these mats and share the trainers. One would use them, chuck them back in the mats, and then the other would fish them out and use them, and they would chuck them back and rinse and repeat. It was also said that a lot of the time Kendrick would just jump up and launch them in, so they would just land pretty much anywhere and inside any of the mats. But it was a way of hiding them so that other people didn't use them, but his friend knew exactly, not exactly where they were at. I guess if he's launched them, they're not going to know which one it's gone in, but he just has to look around and he knows that the shoes are there waiting for him. Now, these shoes, they were split up, as I said, and they have brought a lot of discussion around them. One of the shoes that was under his head was sat on like a pool of blood, but it didn't have any blood on the shoe, which is very weird. But, depending on where it's dripped from, his blood, if it's not dripping close to the shoe, then it's not going to hit the shoe, but then the pool is going to form underneath it. So some people do believe that the shoe was placed there afterwards, which is why it's not got any blood in it. And other people believe that, obviously, because of the pooling of the blood, it's pooled underneath it, but none has actually gone on it because of where it was dripping. I do find it kind of strange that the shoe didn't have blood on, but, I guess that could be why. There could be a perfectly good explanation for that. If you guys know of another, reasonable explanation as to why the shoe didn't have any blood on, please let me know, because I'm interested to find out what you guys think. There was also blood found on the inside of the mat where his head kind of was, but there was none on his lower body or anything on his school books or anything like that. He also had a lot of blood in his face, which the 3 autopsies will explain. And yes, I do say 3 autopsies because, again, his family did not believe that this was accidental. They thought their son was murdered. And so what you're going to do when you think that your child's been murdered, you are going to try for more autopsies. You're going to try and get it looked into again because you believe with all of your soul that your son was murdered. So yes, you're going to do that. And that is what they did. Police asked for all 48 hours of footage before the incident and was told that it would take quite a while because there were literally up to 40 cameras in that school and they didn't get it for several days. The detective did watch some of the footage that was already at the school at the time initially, and he told the IT technician to make a copy of that, to copy the entire footage from that entire wing, and that was delivered on a hard drive 5 days later. The police interviewed pupils amongst many other people. They were trying to find out what on earth happened, and apparently they were saying that it was an accident before the postmortem had even been done, but there's not really meant much evidence to say otherwise at this point. I guess you could say that you would hope that a police officer or that the police would treat every death or anything like that as a potential, that it couldn't have just been accidental, as a potential crime scene. Because if it was an accident, then it was an accident. Yes, okay, they've gathered some evidence and they've done whatever, but they can then say for sure that it's an accident. But if it's not, and it was a murder, then they've gathered no evidence. And so that's like a huge thing in this case. That some people believe that the police work around it was very shoddy, but other people believe that it wasn't, because it was an accident, and so they're not going to cordon it off as a crime scene, and they're not going to do this, that and the other, because straight away they thought accident. The Lance County Sheriff Department ran the autopsy by the Bureau of Investigations, and that came back very quickly to say that he had died due to positional asphyxiation with no visible injuries found. So essentially he suffocated due to the position that he was in, stuck inside the mat. He couldn't get out and he suffocated. The reason that he was bleeding, because people have wondered, like, why was there so much blood? It's because imagine you being upside down for a long period of time, the blood rushes to your head. And he was found 21 hours later, and being upside down for that length of time, the blood pools in your head and then it's got nowhere to go. And so it, as disgusting as it sounds and as horrific as it sounds, it leaks out of your orifices, out of anywhere that it can, and therefore it bloated his head. So the blood is sat in his head for a while, it's bloated it all up, and then it's leaked out onto the floor. And that is why his face was severely bloated. Again, there's a picture of that. You can see it. There are 2 pictures of his face. I'll tell you more about that later on, about what his parents did in regards to the pictures, but don't confuse them. One is when he was found, and the other is after, like, his autopsy. So, you know, a lot more time has passed. His body has unfortunately decayed more, and he looks a lot worse than he did when he was first found. But he looks pretty horrific when he was first found. It is awful. When you look at pictures of his face and then you look at how he was found, and he kind of looks unrecognisable, and that is just so sad. Back to the case. There were blood stains found on the wall near to where his body was found, but they tested it and it was determined that it wasn't actually Kendrick's blood. But no further tests were done to see where that blood had come from, which I found a little bit strange. But again, they thought it was accidental, and because that blood wasn't his, it was a gym. You know, somebody could have cut themselves and I guess got blood on the wall. I don't know. They also found a bloody tissue which was found by the bathroom. Again, it didn't belong to Kendrick, but that, along with the samples found on the wall, tested inconclusive, and they didn't find out who it was from. Authorities maintained that forensic testing did not show anything that implied that there was a struggle or a fight in any way. When they were asked if they could determine who this blood sample came from, a detective said that the chances of finding who that belonged to amongst 3,000 students was very slim. As I mentioned before, the police didn't tape off the scene as a crime scene. They also didn't notify the coroner of the death until 6 hours later, which is illegal. But they said it was because they didn't want to make him aware of it until they had swept the crime scene. But they definitely should have notified the coroner, that is for sure. Like, as soon as they found his body. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. That is what they said as to why they didn't do that, but regardless of that, they should have done it anyway. They also never wore shoe protection at the scene. Again, police don't treat every scene as a crime scene, which I really wish they did. Because if that was a crime scene and if he was murdered, like so many people do believe, then their shoes and things could have contaminated it, could have contaminated the crime scene. People believe that it was just very shoddy police work and that they didn't protect the scene at all, which they didn't. But again, if they're thinking it's accidental, they don't normally. So I don't know, do they? Maybe I'm wrong on that one. Maybe they do treat them as a crime scene until they figure out it's accidental. I don't know. Please let me know if I'm wrong on that, because I'm just not sure. There was also this sweatshirt that was found in the gym. It was close to his body, but not super close. It was kind of at the other end of the bleachers, I think. And that had speckles of blood on it, but was never taken into evidence. Why? I do not know. Another pair of shoes were found close by. That was splattered with red matter, which authorities said wasn't blood, and again was never collected as evidence. The police ruled his death as accidental, a tragic accident. They said that he was wandering around the gym, he had climbed onto the mats because he stored his shoes in there, that he had reached down and kind of leant over to try and get these shoes, and he had subsequently gotten stuck. It was either that or he already had his shoes and one of them fell into the mat, and in a bid to try and reach it, to try and get it, he reached over and he fell into it. So he falls in head first, he's got his arm outstretched to get his shoe, and he's stuck. He can't go anywhere, he can't get out, and he suffocates. His body was very horrific to look at. As I said, his face was all bloated. And for the family to see him like that must have just been so awful. I just can't even imagine. They didn't accept that it was an accident though, not at all. They still don't accept it to this day. The entire investigation was only 4 months long before it was closed. And again, the family said that he was murdered. And yes, he could have been murdered. It could have been accidental or he could have been murdered. And so it does deserve to be like thoroughly looked into. The day after his body was found, the family approached Rev Floyd Rose of Valdosta Southern Christian Leadership Conference and asked him to run an independent investigation into the case. He agreed, and from that point onwards, the conference would help, in the case as much as they could. In April of 2013, the Johnson family all held hands and linked together to block the way in protest to the Lowndes County Courthouse. And they were actually arrested for civil disobedience. And Reverend Rose put up his own house as collateral to bail Jackie out of jail. So that is how strongly he felt towards this cause. In May of 2013, the family did this fundraising event and they were raising money that they led people to believe was going to go towards a reward, for any information on Kendrick's case. They raised $5,000 and people don't know where that went because it didn't go towards the reward for Kendrick. Whether it went somewhere else in the case, I don't know. But it didn't go towards that because instead a local businessman called Roy Taylor fronted the money. He fronted $10,000 to Reverend Rose, to put up as a reward. Kendrick's best friend, Solomon Arrington, who was 16, came forward to tell police about Facebook threats he'd received just hours before he'd learned that his best friend was dead. His mother told the media that this message read that her son would end up in a body bag. She reported the message to a detective at the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, but he quickly downplayed any connection, apparently. I mean, it could have just been like an idle threat kind of thing. We just don't know. Maybe it should have been looked more into instead of just kind of being brushed off and brushed under the carpet. The family arranged for their son's body to be exhumed for a second autopsy. They hired private pathologist Dr. William Anderson, and he made several new discoveries in his autopsy. This is probably where a lot of the theories and things come from, and a lot of the controversy, because he found that when he opened Kendrick back up again to look into how he died, that he had no organs. He had nothing. From the head down to his waist, he had nothing. Instead, he was filled up with crumpled up newspaper, which is pretty freaky when you actually think about it. Like, that's creepy. But the people that had processed the body was the Georgia Bureau of Investigations initially, and then they passed the body onto a funeral home, which was Harrington Funeral Home. So they got the body after Georgia, and they claimed that he came to them without any organs, and they did put the newspaper in him, but they hadn't taken his organs out. They went on to say that the first person to do the autopsy, which was obviously the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, found out that his organs were damaged beyond repair and thus threw them away. Now, that is not normal practice, I don't believe. Normally, the organs come back in a bag, inside the body, in a bag, because if there's any trauma on them or if there's any sign of injury or anything like that and another investigation is opened up into it, like this one, there was another autopsy done, people can look at them. If obviously not a lot of time has passed and they haven't already began decomposition beyond the point where they can look at them. But that's what they normally do anyway. It hadn't really been that long since the first autopsy, and so the fact that they were saying that the organs had probably been damaged beyond sort of anything due to the normal decomposition of a body, people just didn't understand because it hadn't actually been that long. Yes, okay, he was found 21 hours later after being hung upside down, so there would be some damage to his organs, but surely not that much to the point where they were rendered useless. To just throw them away, literally toss them in the trash and then not even tell anyone. Literally not even tell anyone. I found it really strange, and boy did so many other people think that was strange too. So the funeral home director claimed that was probably what happened, and then because of obviously he was losing his shape, your organs and stuff helped fill you out. So they crumpled up the newspaper and put it in. Now that is, you may think that is strange. It's not really normal practice nowadays. It used to happen a lot in the 70s, I believe. Basically, nowadays they do fill the bodies with things like that if they've got no organs. But it's normally sand, like sawdust or something like that. It's never normally newspaper. but I believe that it has been used before and it's just like a cheaper option rather than using sawdust or something like that. I believe it's so that the body can retain its shape. So like if you have an open casket or you want to go and see the body after, it just retains its shape. Funeral directors try to do everything that they can to try and make your loved one look as like they were, as normal, I guess, as much as the person that they used to be as they can for the family. So they do all sorts of things that you probably don't even realize that they do. An investigation was done into the funeral home, but they were found that although the practices of the newspaper was not following best practice, they did nothing wrong. They were found to have no wrongdoing, but it didn't really answer the question as to who had taken out the organs and just chucked them away. So another main thing that he found in his autopsy was that there was some blunt force trauma to Kendrick's neck, like the back of his head, where it, like his neck area and the back of his head. He claimed that this wouldn't have been caused by suffocation. From what I could find though, is that it was literally this tiny little bruise, like less than an inch big, and it's been hugely debated as to whether something that small, like a mark that small, could have actually caused someone's death. I wouldn't have thought so personally, but again, I'm no expert, I don't know. It was speculated that this blow, whatever it was, could have, I believe, split one of the arteries in his neck or something like that, which caused him, whilst he was upside down, to then bleed out, and obviously the blood pooled in his head and leaked out everywhere. I don't know whether that could have happened. I guess potentially, but I don't know. I feel like that tiny little mark like that do that much damage? If you guys know, then please enlighten me, because I don't. There's also a lot of suspicion around the surveillance footage. The family waited months to get it. There was 290 hours of it across, I believe, 35 cameras inside and outside of the gym. And it just kind of added to the confusion around this case. There were 4 separate cameras inside of the gym. 2 of them only show a few seconds of Kendrick jogging into the gym. There was 1 camera that was aimed at the mat area that was blurry as all hell. You cannot see anything on it. You cannot make anything out. It's just blurry blobs. So people believe that, obviously, why was that 1 camera blurry? I mean, it could be coincidental. It could just be one big coincidence that the camera wasn't focused correctly and nobody noticed, because, hell, why would they? Why would they need to look at that one? Until they did need to look at that one. Other people, I guess, believe that it was more set up and that it was blurry for a reason. I don't know. The footage also on the cameras that wasn't blurry was very much jumping around and very erratic. So you've got Kendrick walking in the camera on one scene. If I can put it up, I will do. And then he just disappears. He's walking, you see somebody else in there as well, another student, and then they both just disappear. And then kind of in the middle of the screen, another 2 different people appear. And people found that really, really strange. So it jumps around a lot. There's also no timestamps on it. And people suspected that the footage had been tampered with. But the school clarified that this was raw footage. The sheriff's office clarified that this was also raw footage that they had gained from the school and that they had also not tampered with it and that there had been no edits on it whatsoever. When CNN got their hand on this video, they hired a forensic video analyst called Grant Fredericks. He looked into it further, and a lot of it was just like explained away. Erratic movement could have been because the cameras were motion sensor detected, so they only turn on when they see movement. And again, the blurriness was just unfortunate that the lens was out of focus. There was also an hour of footage found to be missing on all 4 cameras from that day, and he also found out that they were not original files. 2 cameras were missing an hour and 5 minutes of footage, ending when Kendrick entered the gym, and the other 2 were missing 2 hours and 10 minutes each, not starting again until 1:15 and 1:16. Within that time, other students would have entered that gym, and yet nothing was picked up. The motion sensors did not pick up any movement. A gym is like a busy place. Can you imagine nobody going in it for 2 hours in a busy school? I can't.
During that hour and 5 minutes, several students are seen walking into and out of the old gym from the surveillance camera just outside the gym door. We count 7 male students, and 3 of them walk into the gym within 3 minutes prior to Kendrick Johnson walking in.
Whether they were broken, in a sense, and they just didn't pick anything up in that time because they were malfunctioning, or whether somebody had turned them off. I don't know. It was very strange, but it could just be a coincidence again. Or it might not be. Grant went through and he only found 18 minutes of footage of Kendrick that entire day. He had entered the school at 7:31 a.m. Then he was last seen at 1:09 p.m. walking into the gym. Frederick said, "People found it super suspicious." The family did file a few lawsuits. Yeah, a lot of lawsuits, kind of. In January of 2013, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Lowndes County Board of Education, alleging that Kendrick was violently assaulted, severely injured, suffered great physical pain and mental anguish, and subjected to insult and loss of life. It alleged that the defendants had ignored his apparent harassment and his repeated attacks that were happening on him by a white student. It also alleged that Kendrick was attacked whilst on a bus, and this was 14 months before his death. This lawsuit really kind of pushed that it was to do with race and that he was targeted because of his race, and it really focused on one boy called Brandon Bell. I say one boy, it was kind of the brothers. There were two brothers, so Brandon Bell was like a wrestler, and his bigger brother was also kind of included in it, and they were both former classmates of Kendrick's. Rick Bell was their father, and he was actually an FBI agent, which just spurred the conspiracy theories even more. Jackie talked about how Kendrick said these two lads were harassing him. They were harassing him at school, and it had been happening for a while. The Ebony magazine then published a few articles on, well, they redacted the names of these boys, but it was of the Bell brothers. The description of what they wrote in it, pretty much you could tell straight away who they were talking about, essentially. So they messed up big time on that one. And so in August of 2014, their parents filed a lawsuit against the magazine, a $5 million lawsuit, claiming that their sons had been harassed and bullied because of this article. Apparently these boys also refused to help in the investigation, like at all. But whether that was because their father was an FBI agent and he was telling them never to help in things like that, or I have also read that they did cooperate, so I don't know. There's a lot of he said, she said in it, a lot of controversy. I don't know. But this did lead people to believe that they were suspects in this case. In January 2015, Kendrick's family filed another lawsuit. This was a $100 million lawsuit against 38 individuals. It included 3 of Kendrick's classmates, the Bell family, I believe, but I'm not going to get into all of the names because 38 of them, there's so many of them. But the lawsuit alleged that Rick, who was the FBI agent, ordered his 2 sons to attack their classmate Kendrick. His family alleged that his death was a murder and that they accused the respondents of conspiracy to cover up the crime. They found the allegations to be unfounded and baseless, and it's true, you know, there's really no proof of that. Many people believe it and have all these things in their mind to back that up, but there's just no actual proof. In November 2015, the Department of Justice filed a motion in the civil case to intervene and stay the case. After this motion was denied, Jackie and Kenneth dismissed their own wrongful death lawsuit, saying that they had hoped to refile it after the conclusion of the Department of Justice investigation. Because the Johnsons pulled the people in, accused them, and then dropped their own lawsuit, they were sued themselves for more than $850,000. That was in attorney fees and $1 million in defamation fees, which is just insane. On the 20th of June in 2016, the Department of Justice finished their work and they announced that they wouldn't be filing any criminal charges related to Kendrick Johnson's death, and that after an extensive investigation, there isn't enough evidence to prove beyond reasonable doubt that someone violated his civil rights and committed this crime. On the 10th of August 2017, a judge ordered that the Johnson family must pay more than $292,000 in attorney fees to the dozens of people accused in the lawsuit. This was around the time that people found that the picture that they were actually using, so they had Kendrick's picture up on a poster and borders, which I don't know why you do, because why would you want to see your son like that all the time? The pictures are horrific, but the picture that they'd actually been using, and I mean his face is severely mangled, I guess. I don't know what other words to use for that, but it's horrible, it's horrific, and people, they were using that and they were kind of going along the lines of how could this have been an accident, look at the state of his face. But that was actually the one after his first autopsy was done, so his body would have deteriorated a lot more since then. It wasn't the first picture that was taken of his body when he was found, and they were making people believe that it was, so they lost a lot of following because of that and a lot of trust off people because they lied. They pretended that that was what his son looked like when he first came out on the mat when it wasn't. Rev Rose, that was highly involved in the case all the time, in 2015, he announced he no longer thinks that Kendrick was murdered. On the 22nd of June in 2018, Kendrick's mother applied for his body to be exhumed once more for a third autopsy, which happened, and the results came back that it was a non-accidental death and that it was due to blunt force trauma. Again, kind of similar to what the second autopsy found. So here is where we get to the latest information on this case. As I said in the beginning, it has been reopened, in a sense, to be re-looked into. On March the 10th in 2021, the case was officially reopened. However, Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Pollock stated that he is not claiming that something was wrong with the original investigation or that the accidental death conclusions of the original investigation are wrong. The sheriff also stated that he does not consider the case to be a homicide and that the two suspects, the two brothers named in the previous legal actions, are not believed to be suspects in this case. The Department of Justice collected 17 boxes of evidence, videotapes, crime scene photos, and more evidence, which has all been released to the Lowndes County Sheriff, Ashley Pollock, and then obviously he announced that he was reopening it. He was never involved in the initial investigation and has just basically said that the public have so many questions about Kendrick's death and that they deserve answers. The Johnson family is obviously hopeful that after 8 long years, they might finally find out the truth about their son and how Kendrick Johnson died. Again, if it comes back accidental, whether they will accept that or not, I don't know. Now, the latest information I can find on this is this apparent video audio tape that has been handed into the police. So apparently, Jackie and Kenneth have purchased this tape from someone they don't know the name of because they gave a false name for $1,000, and on it somebody admits to killing Kendrick Johnson, apparently, and they have handed that into the police, so I guess we'll see what comes from that, if anything. I think the circumstances around that are really odd because they actually bought it from someone, which I find is weird. It's either somebody, you know, trying to fraud them, somebody who's recorded that and is playing on the family's pain and know that they can get money out of it, and that may be where the tapes come from. It could be legitimate, or I've also seen speculation that the family hired somebody to do it. Now, I'm obviously not putting any like defamation against the name or anything like that. That is just something I've seen. Again, I've jumped down so many rabbit holes. I've seen so many things on this case. So that is just something that somebody else has said. Not personally. I wouldn't say that myself because obviously I wouldn't say that about a grieving family at all. But basically the police are trying to find out whether this tape is legitimate, whether it is extortion or anything else. This case is just insane. Like, the holes that you jump in and it leads you to somewhere else. It's just incredulous. Like, my gosh. Some people believe that Kendrick was murdered, that he was murdered, rolled up in that mat, and then it was put back. Other people believe that it was just a tragic accident, that he was trying to get his shoes out and he did fall in and he couldn't get out, and it was just an awful, awful accident. Other people believe that maybe it was a prank that went wrong. You know, something. Maybe they were pranking him, maybe they shoved him in there as a joke, left him, not expecting him to suffocate to death, and obviously he died as a result of it. In my opinion, personally, it might cause controversy, this, in a sense, but what I believe is that I'm leaning more towards that Kendrick Johnson's death was an accident. Have you ever done something, like, really silly, and you think afterwards, like, wow, I shouldn't have done that? How many ways in which that could have gone wrong? Maybe that is what happened. Maybe. A lot of people have said, right, so why didn't Kendrick, if he wanted his shoes, why did he not move the mats out? Now, there was piles of mats in front of him. They're big, they're really heavy, and they're awkward to move. And he was 17. He's quite a tall guy. I believe he was 5'10", and the mats were 6 foot total, so quite a tall guy. Can you imagine thinking, I'm not moving all the mats, I just want my shoes, and reaching down in for them, leaning over, stretching down, and then getting stuck? Maybe he's done it 1,000 times before without an issue. Maybe this time the mats were just too tight and he couldn't get out or something. There's also a lot of speculation about the size of it. So I believe his shoulder width was 19 inches. And the width of this mat was 14 inches. And people have speculated that it must have been murder because there's no way he can fit in it. His shoulder length could not fit in it. His dad and parents have done tests on it and how they tried to fit in it with that, you know, with a smaller width, and they just couldn't. But again, with the rabbit holes that I jumped in, I've seen somebody draw this diagram of 19 inches across versus a 14-inch gap, and then angle it. Because if you remember, Kendrick was found with like his arm there and his arm up. Does that really adjust your width of your shoulders? I don't know, but it could do. And that is how he could have possibly fit in. But people believe that because the gap is so small, he could have definitely not fit in there, and therefore he was rolled up in it and then put up. But there was also quite a few people around not long after. They wouldn't necessarily have had enough time to do that, in my opinion. Kill him, wrap him up in a mat, tape it up, put the mat back, which is already very heavy, put all the other mats back, and then there's people all around the gym. Nobody noticed anything. I don't think they had enough time to do that. So, do you believe that it was an accident, or do you believe that it was foul play? This entire case is strange, admittedly. How it was all handled, it's just a bit weird. Oh, I also forgot to mention, even the online group Anonymous made a video about him. They felt so strongly towards it. You can go and look that up yourselves if you want, but they do believe that he was murdered. Or at least at the time of making that video, they believed he was murdered. I can't remember when they actually made it. Either way, whether you believe it's accidental or not, it looks like this case is being looked into again. Maybe once and for all. Like, they can't just keep reopening these cases when there's no evidence against foul play. So maybe this will be the last time. I don't know. Whatever they rule, I guess we will find out shortly. And I just hope that whatever it is, it can give his family peace, because they lost their son and it's tragic. The whole tragic thing about this is that Kendrick lost his life. Either way, whether it was accidental or murder, that 17-year-old boy that had all these plans, that was very intelligent, and maybe could have gone, you know, he could have been a football star. Who knows? He had all these dreams and ambitions, and his life was lost at the age of just 17. And his family were just so broken after it, and it's just heartbreaking. So yeah, that is the end of the case. Please tell me what your thoughts and theories are in this case. I am seriously interested to know. It was a massive rabbit hole for me to jump into. I actually didn't expect it. I really didn't when I was looking into this case. I didn't expect all the little nooks and crannies that I found on it. It kind of blew my mind a bit. So yeah, just let me know what you think. I am really, really interested in the comments below. Give me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for similar content. I also have a Patreon for anyone that's interested. But yeah, that is the end of the case. Anyway, guys, that's all I have today on the case of Kendrick Johnson. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.